Good day to you. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Dennis Waters. Today is 6/4, June the 4th, 2020. Today I spent a bit of time listening to and looking at the memorial service, the first of many, that will take place to honor George Floyd. Mr. Floyd died at the hands of police officers. A police officer named Sharpton knelt with his knee on George Floyd's neck for a period of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Mr. Floyd was murdered. His brothers, nephews, and others gathered together to honor him today, to begin this process, this grieving process of going through the emotions of what it is to lose a loved one and the way that they lost him. And I want to honor them and honor him, and also honor what his death means for me personally, because it has brought up a lot of things from within me. Initially, when this happened on May the 25th, I thought of the aspect of a statement that was said that he moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, in order to become his best self. And I thought that was a profound statement, profound idea, that he had become his best self. I also said that when he cried out for his mama, because I am a person whose mother has passed as well, that when he cried out for his mother perhaps came to get him, to tell him that he was all right. He was going to be all right. He said that in regard to his past, and he called out for his children to let them know that he was not leaving them and abandoning them of his own free will, that he really had no choice, that at some point it was already predetermined, premeditated, if you will, by those who were doing him harm, that they were going to do him in. They were going to kill him. And so as I looked at that, I stayed with the idea that he was someone calling out for his mother. As I said, when my mother died, I remember that at the funeral, I was crying seemingly unconsolably, and that I was there. And what happened for me was that my Uncle Eddie, as we call him, who's 103 years old now, he had his hand on my shoulder, and that steadied me at that moment, steadied me. I was just crying. I was a grown man, a minister no less. I was still crying because it was my mother. And so those were my thoughts. Today, at the memorial service, I heard the Reverend Al Sharpton. And he took the idea of this mother coming to get her son. As he said, he took it to a new level when he basically says that she almost materialized, if you will, for her son to come and stretch her hand out and grab her son and pull him into a place where there was no more police brutality. There was no more lack. There was no more sickness, and there was no more death. And there was no more of anyone kneeling on your neck. And then Reverend Al took this item and he moved it to still another level. And he applied it to this day and time and said, get up off our neck. Get your knees off our neck. And he began to talk about the systemic racism in the country and the systemic ways that we have been held down from being innovative and creative and rising to be our best selves because of the way things are in the society. Because of the way things are in the society. And I want to share with you an incident in my life that was similar to that. It had consequences in my life. And Reverend Al today spoke of the aspect of at least the March on Washington that is a part of this presentation, a part of it, the original March on Washington. And you will see, but he spoke of it as coming in August of this year, that there will be a March on Washington that will be on the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. And I thought it was so profound in the sense that I sensed that Spirit was speaking directly to me to speak about this. I've spoken about it before, but there was also this that I'm going to begin this discussion with. And it is a quote that was done today, in which I believe it was the lawyer, the Honorable Lawyer Benjamin Crump, I believe, quoted Dr. King. I had never heard nor remember reading this quote before. He said, "He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it." I looked that up on the web and I saw some other statements that were very similar. He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it. Another quote says, "He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it." Desmond Tutu said, you remember Desmond Tutu involved in the removal of apartheid in South Africa. Bishop Tutu said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." That's what he said. If you are neutral, you don't do anything. You don't say whether you are for or against one side or the other. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you're just neutral, then you have chosen the side of the oppressor. With all that you are seeing today, yesterday, a few days ago, the generals who come out made their statements. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Another quote, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal." These are powerful statements. There comes a time when silence is betrayal if you say nothing. Silence is a betrayal. And then our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. You could say the day we become silent about people that matter. Our lives begin to end. You remember the individual said years ago, Black Lives Matter. people tried to make that neutral. They said all lives matter. Well, all lives were not having the air denied them by the police officer because he thought he could get away with it. That's why the statement is black lives, trying to say to that man years ago, black lives, this life that you have here, this life matters. This life matters. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things and about people, things like criminal justice reform. We become silent about the economic inequities in society. We become silent Then this one says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence. The silence, that's not just being silent on the outside, meaning you're not saying anything. Silence is a different word. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Now, the incident that occurred for me happened so many years ago. So many years ago. I was in a seminary, one that I originally did not really want to go to, but I was told that in order to continue in the ministry, I had to attend the seminary. And so I agreed to attend the seminary. And there I was, as I was in undergraduate school, a very good student. If the professor said that we needed to read 5,000 pages in addition to doing our work, I read 5,000 pages in addition to doing my work. And if I had to do that for 4 classes, 5,000 each, in the midst of 13 weeks, to read 20,000 pages, then I did that. I was doing my last year of seminary, and before the classes began, we were to do what was called a colloquium. That's a week-long session of classes. And we come in to discuss contemporary ideas, contemporary topics. Our teacher was a man from Austria. He was there, he had his degrees, he was a doctor. And it seems the first day, he made a statement. Now let me say that in undergraduate, that I had actually, in the undergraduate, I had went to a school and I was there for I had already, when I transferred to the school, I had 2 years of college. I studied the first year. I was a very good student in what for us was the core courses of Greek and Hebrew. And I did well in my classes. That's not bragging, that's just, I did well in my classes. I came to school, I had already been in the army. I had already worked in corporate America. I worked for what is now Verizon. It was called C&P in Bell Atlantic. I had interacted with people. My last office had been a place called, it may even be a place where people are marching now. There in D.C., 1325 G Street. That was Northwest D.C. And that was where my office was at the time. And I had gone to Oakwood College after being in the Army, after being in corporate America, and I'd gone to the school to study for ministry because I sensed that I had a call to ministry. And when I went there, I went to study because That's what I believe that God would have me to do. And I was testing that to see if God would have me to do that. And so I went to school, and I did well, as I said. And then my last year there at the school, I was encouraged to run for office in what was called a Religion and Theology Forum. And that's what I did. And I won the position of treasurer. It was great. It was great. It was awesome. My president at the time was a fellow named Jules. Jules wanted to bring in great speakers. And in order to do that, we needed to be able to fund their travel and to give them a gratuity. And we needed funds for doing that. And we developed a great way of doing that, taking up offerings and then also selling tapes, as we call them, cassette tapes. We were good. I had a partner with me, a fellow named Blake. I'll just mention their last names. Those who know them know them. It was just nice. And I graduated. I believe it's called magna cum laude. I believe it is. And so I and my family were given the jobs. We were thankful for that. We prayed about it, asked God to work miracles in our life, and He did. Or she did. Or God did. Spirit did. However you want to work with that. Just worked in our life in a magnificent way. It was wonderful. And then, as I said, I needed to go to the seminary. I give you all of that because at the seminary, my first year I was there, again, being studious, doing the work that was involved. Very thankful for that. Made good grades. Thankful. That next year, as we began that colloquium, I had previously been elected to be the president of the Black Student Association of the seminary on a predominantly white campus. We'd already experienced racism on that campus, so we knew it was there. We'd already tested and saw that professors would actually give different grades for the same paper depending on who turned in the paper. We'd already tested it. We didn't just say it, we tested it to see if it was true, and it did happen, and we did report it. And so I was the president, and we were sitting in class, and the professor from Austria stood up that day, and he made this profound statement. He said, Dr. King should not have marched. The year was 1986. Now take that in. Dr. King had marched. The year was 1963, I believe. The March on Washington. Had been killed in 1968. I'm in school in 1986. And this professor from Austria said Dr. King should not have marched. And there was 150 students in the class. 50 of them were of African descent. Maybe about 10 or 20 from Africa, the continent. And then the other 30 or so were from North America, or perhaps Canada. And this professor said Dr. King should not have marched. 100 whites or Caucasians there. And there was silence. Silence. Remember this statement? Silence can be like betrayal. I stayed silent for as long as I can. Silence for as long as I could. And so I ultimately said, why? What should he have done? What should he have done? What should he have done? The professor initially was stunned that someone would dare to actually question him like that. Because most of the students that were there were probably under 25 years old. They had probably gone to high school, graduating at 18. Then they'd gone on to college, spent 4 years, perhaps even 5 years, and maybe they were 22, 23. And now they were in seminary, 24, 25 years old, maybe. I, on the other hand, 1982, I was 30. In 1986, I was 34, or going on 34. I had been in corporate America. I had a different perspective. I'd also pastored for 2 years, as they say, in the field. And I was not a first generation of that particular body of people or denomination. So I said, why? My sisters, 2 of them, had marched in the 60s. And this man was standing from Austria and discounting Dr. King and then discounting my sisters. And one of my sisters had died. Now, I was not consciously processing all of this. I wasn't. Subconsciously, perhaps. But I wanted to know why. And initially, he was shocked, and then he tried to push back and say, we're not going to discuss that now. And then, when everyone joined in and they wanted to know why, he then said, we'll put it to a vote. Well, we're 50 blacks and 100 whites. You would think that the vote would go his way, but it didn't. The individuals wanted to know, they wanted to know why. What should he have done? And so they voted that we would have the discussion, and then the professor still would not have the discussion. It was after the class that I learned that I was in trouble. I went to class the next week, and a professor stood up and just beat me with the word, beat me with psychological tricks, just beat me. He got so bad I had to stay out of class for a couple of days. Later, we wrote letters to individuals who were representatives of what we call black conferences. Wrote letters to the dean of the seminary, advising him of what we had found and what was going on. We identified this material that I mentioned of the way that the professor was grading and other things that were taking place. There were only 2 individuals who were on the campus who were black, who were in the seminary, the theological seminary, who were black in teaching. We made mention of that. And I had said that when we go back to our respective churches, what were we supposed to say to our congregations? What were we supposed to say? Were they supposed to stand on the sidelines? What were we supposed to do? I wanted to know. But as I said, other than me speaking, the other individuals, pretty much black, white, all of them were silent. They not only were silent, there was silence. The astounding thing to me was that I later learned that the person who would become my president counted that against me. It was strike number 1. I did not know that. Then, when I went to work in a community, a disadvantaged community, a low-income community. I started working with an individual who was addressing the needs of his community. He was buying houses that were condemned and rehabilitating them and then selling them to individuals who were in need of housing. He was buying up whole blocks of houses, and then he would renovate them, move people in, and when he would do such things, he would invite the media to come, the television shows, the newspapers and all that, and get written up. He also had friends of his that would come and they would stand guard in the middle of the night and prevent drug dealers from being in the neighborhoods. And I became involved with the ministers in the area, joining the local ministerium in that area. I was even invited to preach at a Lenten service in 1986, 1987. I was involved with the community, but there were members in the church that I was pastoring who were connected to the conference, but they were not connected to the community that we were serving. And they objected to the idea that I was connected to the community. And they saw it on many occasions to tell me that I shouldn't be out in the community. I shouldn't reach out. I shouldn't get involved. But I did. I came from those communities. I visited one family, and the family had stopped coming to church. I remember this. The family had stopped coming to church. The lady had a number of children. I went to see them to encourage them to come back to church. They had stopped coming to church before I even got there. And I went to see them, and the day I went to see them, I saw a little baby standing up on what would be the kitchen table, stark naked, as we call it. And I went in and sat down and talked to that mother. That mother came back to the church and is in the church to this day. She had, I believe it was like 5 or 6 young men at that time who are grown men now. They are like George Floyd. One of them in particular, indeed a leader. Powerful young men. One of them in corporate America, now leading in a major organization. I'm familiar with them. I know them. And I've told them wherever they are, they should never be afraid to come up and talk with me. I remember going to their home. But the individuals there did not want me associating with the community and even with members who had left. They reported me to the conference. And that became my strike number 2. And later, when stuff happened at another place, there was another incident that occurred. And part of that incident was that when stuff occurred, I remember that I got a call to go and visit and do a series of preachments. I got a call from somebody I didn't even know I went to school with, but he called me and said, would you come preach in my church for a week of prayers? We call it a week of revival. And I said, I don't do those particular type of revivals. He said, no, we'll take care of you, come. And we were in the midst in my own church of all kinds of things that were going on, particularly in regard to people coming into the church and others saying various things about that. What is amazing about it is that I agreed to go and do that week of prayer, and I left on a Friday morning. I got to this place that Friday afternoon, and I got a call from someone in my church that said that the leader who considered me as having 2 strikes was going to visit the church that I served as pastor to on a Saturday night. And he said that he had informed me, which he had not, and that I had chosen to go to this other place to preach. I had no money, but I knew I had to get back to my church. I knew it. And so one dear lady used her credit card at that time to bring me back to my church. I flew back, and then I had to basically hitchhike, because we had one car, to get from my home to the church. And I walked in as they were discussing things concerning me. At any rate, at the end of all of that, there were 3 strikes, and I was out of the conference. People may say, well, that really happened a long time ago. Well, if you listen to this whole thing about being on our necks, you know that a whole lot of things have a cumulative effect. There's a cumulative effect. And Reverend Al was good at just bringing that forth. If this had not happened, we would have been able to do far more than we have been able to do up until now. I'm actually still growing. I'm very thankful to God for that. I'm very thankful. I recently worked with an individual in regard to getting his business going or continuing, a barber. He's got his plan. He's moving forth to move from just simply being the barber, but to the owner of the barbershop. I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to it coming to pass. He's got a plan that he's working on, and I've worked with a number of individuals. We worked in the inner city of Baltimore, Maryland, worked in a elementary school there. We worked with young people, and I remember there was a young lady in the math class that we were in. We were teaching Egyptian math, and this teacher that was there, a Caucasian man, was saying that this young lady could not learn, but when we were doing Egyptian math, I called for students to come up, 4th grade students to come up and actually lead out in teaching from the board, and they came up and they did it. And then this young lady I sat beside, and she said, can you teach me how to do Egyptian math? And I said, sure. And I sat there and I taught her how to do Egyptian math. And she went home. She went home that weekend, and she taught her whole family, her siblings and her mother, how to do Egyptian math. But the kicker was that on Monday, when we came back to class, we were doing Egyptian math again, and this young lady said, may I come up front and put my problem on the board? Now, that was amazing. They had never seen her do that. I remember another young man, we was in this school right in the heart of inner city Baltimore, and walked past his desk, 4th grader now, and he said, don't touch me. Well, I hugged him. He said, I'm going to get my daddy. He brought his daddy. His daddy's 6'4". Talked to his daddy and his mother. Told him what we were seeking to do. Never had a problem. We started an after-school program there in Baltimore, and we were able to do a lot of things. Children were big, and we had 77 volunteers. Some of them were from Morgan State. There were about 15 of them. We had 150 plus children, and we were doing what others had tried to do but had failed. We were doing it with an all-volunteer staff, 150 kids. We were doing it at the behest of a pastor, a principal who had actually been one of the young people that were in my church when I served. And then a lady had promised, Caucasian lady had promised that to supplement it, that she would give us something like $25,000. The only requirement really from her was that they would have control over it. And we would not give them control over the school that we actually initiated strategized, provided the philosophy for, and was teaching and everything. And when we would not give her control over it, she then withdrew the funding, promised it to the principal, and the principal got upset and made us close it all down. It was amazing. So I understand what Reverend Al in the spirit was saying when he said knees on the neck. Let me say finally that while I may look and say all kinds of things about what happened so many years ago in 1986, let me also say that I saw pastors, some of whom I went to school with, when Colin Kaepernick did his protests. There were pastors, individuals that I went to Oakwood College, Andrews University with. They did a video. What they said was that we were blacking out the NFL, blacking it out, because they were conscious enough to recognize that the NFL was not treating their players right, and they were not treating the larger society right. No matter what they were trying to do. I've been in the military. And I knew that Colin was not saying that he was taking a knee against the military, nor against America, but against policies. He knew what he was saying. And then also, that year, or I believe it was 2017, there were students that were at the school that I'm speaking of, that I was at. And they said that having seen what they had seen, they gave the administration 1 week, 7 days, to address the issues of racism on the campus. I was so proud of them because they stood together, not just one voice, but a number of voices. And I cannot say that I stood alone, really, when I was doing these things. I had a number of individuals who were standing with me as well when we began to write the conference presidents and all of those kinds of things, regional conference presidents, and understand that those conference presidents, some of them came. There were individuals like the Honorable, I'll mention names for those who may know them, but there was a president whose name was Reverend or Pastor James Edgecombe, who was of the Southeastern Conference, and Pastor Cranston, I believe, or Canson, who we wrote to and spoke to. There was one who was named Elder Charlie Joseph, as we call him, Elder Charlie Joseph. I mean, just a wonderful individual. There were others that came and were with us. Elder Charles Dudley, who came to the school, did a conference with us. So we were not alone, and I had a vice president who stood with me. I will end this item and say that I had one individual that stood with me. And what happened for me, what happened for us on the campus, was that let me say another thing. Right from my school, that my undergraduate school, there was a few years ago, 2017 also, I believe, an individual who was over the religion and theology department, who also led a busload of individuals and others to come up and celebrate one of the anniversaries of Dr. King's marching. Not from the seminary, but from my undergraduate school. And so I celebrate what has taken place in regard to that. So let me make sure I get those things straight. So I wasn't just simply standing alone. I wasn't just simply standing alone, and I don't want to give that. And as I said, I had a vice president whose last name, for those who know him, was Roundtree, as we called him, Tree. Still my friend to this day. This is really a call for us to be there at the time in August. I believe Reverend Al said August the 27th. It's a time for us to be there. Time for us to be there, to be present. Regardless of what the professor said in 1986, what we're seeing today is a major shift in America, a major shift in the world. It's not just black and white. We're doing exactly what should have been done. And what Dr. King would have likely done given the time. You remember he was addressing the same issues. Today we saw a general of the Army, previous general, as he comes forth, and he says that America has a chance to change. And it's really a chance, a decision is made for the better or for the worse. We can go backwards or we can go forward. And he is not just a general, he is over the Brookings Institute. That's major, major. And I appeal to us, to all of us, ministers in every way, ministers, imams, priests, whatever it may be, whoever you are. There may be a whole lot of other things that are going on, and I commend all of that. To be there on August the 27th, 2020. He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. That's why the businesses are coming out. I saw that thing with Ben and Jerry's, and what they were saying, there was the original Ben and the original Jerry. Now that's amazing, isn't it? Coming out and making their statements. All of them coming out. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. Silence. There were so many people. Silence. But today we got videos. We got videos. We have videos of a man sitting on George Floyd's neck. On his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We have videos of him doing it. And do you know, some dead people, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things and people that matter. You ever know anybody that you know they are like a shell? They just repeat. They just repeat. They can only do the company line. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. What I ask you, what I plead with you about, is don't be silent anymore. I commend any individual that comes out in this time and says, I won't be silent and I won't be silenced anymore. If we're asking for a rectifying of the larger sphere, and let there be a rectifying in our circle of influence, let there be a rectifying that takes place. You know who you are. You know when you've been silent. You know who you are. But regardless, please know again, America, we are at a different place. I say again that George Floyd, I just believe again that he grew, regardless of what you may look around and see here and there and how people try to pick his life apart. The fact that a 6'6" man chose not to fight back, chose not to fight back, pleaded for his life, cried out for his mama, looked out for his children, and like his daughter said, my daddy changed the world. And he did. He has more influence, having died, than he had in his entire 46 years of life. And he had influence. You heard his brothers, they are big men, but they are men because he was there. He had to leave them from time to time, but he left. They kept what he had put inside of them. He was always loving and kind and gentle. Big man in more ways than just his height and his build. Then he didn't fight back. He depended on Spirit, God, to deliver. There are some times where you just got to allow God to fight your battles. And I just commend him into the hands of God. God knows. God knows. God knows. And I definitely am praying for his family, for all of us, but especially for his family. Bless you. Take care. Dennis L. Waters, Sr. That would be me. Bye-bye.
At this point, there's going to be music played. The music is called the Evolution of Consciousness, and it's just a meditative piece. My request of you is to think about where you go from here. Just have in mind, where is it that you go, how you intend to really take what has happened in the past few days and change the world. Your circle of influence, what you can do, the difference that you can make, no matter how small that circle, no matter how big that circle, but to work within your circle of influence, no matter what it is. So hear the music, think about it. You can either have your eyes open and watch the picture of Mr. George Floyd, or your eyes can be closed and you can meditate on it. Take care.